Is there anything more annoying than seeing pen-pushing, soft-muscled politicians who couldn't get their way around a squash court, never mind a battlefield, talking about war? Even worse, showing up amongst soldiers in battle fatigues. I mean, come on. He's the sort of person who'd be annoyed if his suit weren't pressed. We're supposed to rely on these comedians, him and Ursula von der Leyen. I mean, I only go on Keir Starmer's Twitter page to look at the thread. He gets hammered every single day. Whoever's running it must have nerves of steel because they never get anything positive. There's just comment after comment slagging him to pieces, saying things like, we don't want our kids to die in a foreign war. And what kills me is while all this is going on, while him and Ursula von der Codpiece are trying to make themselves more relevant, and Macron in his Cuban heels having to get a leg up off Starmer to look important. We've got the actual peacekeepers who are talking about peace, President Putin and President Trump, discussing it as we speak. I think they're in, I don't know, some Arab state somewhere, getting on. Well, we have this comedian that's trying to make a name for himself on the world stage. I remember a few years ago during Brexit, it showed Angela Merkel, and at that time I think it was it Sarkozy, some other, Hollande was running France then, and Merkel and one or two others, Jean-Claude Juncker. They couldn't stand it. He was linked up with Angela Merkel because he couldn't stand up straight. Have you ever seen pictures of him that were leaked? That he used to fly from Strasbourg to Brussels in a private jet, and sometimes he couldn't get off the tarmac because he was comatose in the back on drink. Of course, that's only hearsay from people who claim this. I'm not saying it's true either way. But they were on a barge. It was the Bilderberg, i.e. the WEF then, and they'd had this meeting. They were going up the, I think it was the Danube on a barge, and even Sky News reported it as the boat to nowhere. These people are only legends in their own brew time. They have absolutely no power base. They're basically shot at. The European Union is a failed Ponzi scheme. It's failed. It's only kept the currency going by quantitative easing. It's been propped up for over a decade. And unfortunately, it's never got very good at doing business. And we've got these people here trying to make themselves relevant. I mean, this country of ours, it's running on fumes from Keir Starmer's ego. And Rachel from accounts with her hair like Lego. I mean, Katie Hopkins nailed it with that one, didn't she? Meanwhile, Germany, Poland and Spain signalled reluctance to dispatch peacekeeping forces. Finland's foreign minister also expressed scepticism. And on Friday, the feasibility of Finland sending troops basically plummeted. They won't be the only sceptics, but a lot depends on the US backstop. It all depends on the US backstop. These people haven't even funded NATO properly for decades. America's picked up the slack financially. And all that's going to happen here, we've had all these various fears, haven't we? When the Biden administration were in, it was all rebooted to be afraid of Russia. Yet previously, when President Trump was in 2016, when those two Chinese aircraft carriers were sitting in the Arabian Gulf as the Chinese stood on deck in the Ray-Bans and the Bermuda shorts waiting for the order to get go, they basically all went home because President Trump unexpectedly won and all the kerfuffle about war calmed down. Then as soon as Joe Bedridden got in and signed his first executive order, it's all back on again. Can't you see what's happening here? The people to be afraid of are the ones that are jockeying for more war. The people that you need to trust are the ones that ask for peace. Now what happens is you get flakes like Starmer who start using phrases like, well, we need to do this to get peace. I've seen more sincere serial killers. He talks like that. There's absolutely nothing about that man that makes me want to follow him. I wouldn't follow him into a gent's toilet, let alone a battlefield. So apparently 25% of male youth said they would never fight for Britain anyway, under any circumstances. And we've got a man here prepared to send troops out to Ukraine, put boots on the ground, and yet we've only got 20,000, basically, combat-ready troops available. and he's going to send those to the front line in someone else's country. Now, this can all be stopped in an instant. There doesn't have to be any more war. President Trump couldn't be clearer. He wants to stop the deaths and stop the killing. I'm not sure what our man wants, are you? I mean, I look at that man whose personal ratings are plummeting every day, whose policies are abhorrent, and his party is losing support from its own members. How long can this go on? Well, sadly, it can go on his full term of office because they've got such a wacky majority, because the apathetic of Britain, who were still bothered about Katie Price's eyebrows and whether there was a sale on at TK Maxx and which football teams at home on Saturday, didn't go out and vote because they'd given up. You can understand them to a point, but apathy is what's put us in this place in the first place. Apathy is why the European Union got a grip of us, because people didn't understand what it was about. I wasn't involved in politics then, but I certainly did wake up after my husband told me I was asleep about 9 years ago, and I've blogged something about it all ever since. People who voted for Brexit could see what the European Union was about, which is cloaked communism. It's basically set up on a former ethos of the Soviet Union, which is member states, which were formerly known as countries, have to enslave themselves to the greater good of what unelected, selected politicians decide to do with their taxes and money. And you can see how stupid they are. This is Germany, who decided to buy gas from Russia and leave themselves hogtied to a nation that they would later start to see as a fighting force. You know, how can you reason with people like that? We've had really substandard politicians for such a long time that we've forgotten what decent politicians look like until, of course, Reform got 5 in office and Rupert Law saying all the right things, because he just looks at it like a multimillionaire businessman would. This will work, this will not work. This will be uncomfortable to implement, but we have to do it, as with immigration. His article in the Telegraph is first class. He says all the things that need to be done, all the things that the people with the power base shy away from. But they're not going to be able to shy away from it much longer, because people only take so much. And I predict the next election will see an enormous turnout, because when your own party, you know, when you've took a chance, you've not voted Tory because they've let you down, and so you voted Labour, or even the old Labourites think, oh, well, Labour will be better now that Corbyn's gone. What they've experienced is something actually worse than Corbyn. So, unfortunately, this man cannot survive longer than 4 years. So if it seems like everything's been ramped up, that's probably because it has to be, because he's got to get it all done. But nothing he does cannot be repealed. If you get a government in that's willful to do it, then we can take away any of the laws, which is what basically Reform have said they'll do. Now, at the end of the day, I do believe that Nigel Farage is in the right place at the right time, because the victory of getting a change from Labour, this pretend Labour and Tory conflict, when really the Tories have gone so far liberal that there's very little, you couldn't slice rice paper between them, that there isn't a Tory party anymore. That's the thing that people need to get their head on. There is no Tory party anymore. There's only the Uni Party or change. Now, whether Farage gets it right on every level is irrelevant. It's going to be better if he only addresses the 5 things he's pledged, which is to roll back the race for the zero, which is to introduce a windfall tax to make up for the subsidies that we have to pay for alternative energy, sort the NHS out, and immigration. Now, he's not going to hit it head on. He's going to do this in a way that can be managed, because we're too far gone. We're too far gone for, well, you send them all back. I see the comments all the time on social media. It's impossible to send them all back. The thing to do is just start sending them and stop them coming in. And stop this loophole where people can come on various visas for education or work and bring their families and then they never go home. There's such a lot to address. And what you've got to remember is you need a political will to do it. And the 5 MPs that are in office at the moment from Reform have the political will to do it. So we need that number increasing. That's the only way you can do that. I know a lot of people complain about the setup of reform and the way they've been treated, but it's usually after they've lost. They've lost in an election and these are decent people, but nevertheless, they've lost. And my question to these people, and I've asked it in WhatsApp, is, okay, then if you feel so strongly about the setup of reform, why didn't you complain before you ran for office? Because some of them have run for office multiple times. So why didn't you say, well, I can't represent you like this because I don't agree with the way you set up? Why did you only complain after the loss? Now, it's under human nature to feel peeved about things when it doesn't go your way. And a lot of them say, well, we didn't get the backing from reform. But the thing is this, there's nothing to give you the backing. They're so new. All you've got with reform is what you see. You've got 5 MPs turning up to Westminster. You've got some funding coming in that's being spent on conferences, trying to grow the brand, trying to grow the footprint, trying to help councillors. You won't get any funding. There's no money to give you any funding. These backers that assimilate themselves to reform, or any party, they don't just turn up with a big bag of cash and say, there's 5 million quid, go and blow that. They drip feed it to them. They allow them an allowance to do X, Y and Z. And a lot of that money will be spent on getting them ready to take over as a government, getting them ready with IT skills. There's some incredible people being brought in. And Zia Yusuf is a businessman. Sadly, some of you still only see colour, and that's a huge mistake. Because as you know, with people that you've met through the NHS, there's some people from all backgrounds that are pretty decent people. And what we need to do is stop the ones that just want to abuse the system and take from it without putting anything in. And the only option on the table is reform. No matter who slags it off, no matter how many Tommy Robinson supporters have washed their hands of it, you're not going to get anything else. Because the other smaller parties haven't got the wherewithal, the backing, the candidates to move forward, and all you'll do is split the vote. So we have one chance in 2029, and after that I think I'll pack up talking about politics, because I've had enough. I've been at it 9 years, and I've watched people basically throw the towel in after less time involved. But let's face it, I'm doing it from a cushy point of view. I do it from my home. And I've no intention of running for office, and I've no intention of trying to be famous, so I don't trail about to all the junkets that I get invited to, and I do get invited to a lot. But what you need to do is, all I do is put information out in a way that you can understand it. I want people to feel comfortable asking stupid questions. I want you to say that, what does this mean? What does that mean? Because you've a right to know. And the political bubble purposely keep you out of the dialogue by using terminology you don't understand. And it's unfair. So I set myself up years ago to break through that. So actually what they mean is this. And it's took a lot of work because I've had to look it up. Sometimes I have 3 bloody devices on the go. So that I can think, well, what does that mean? Especially with government documents and legal stuff. I have to read it and then Google what the terminology means. It takes a long time. So when you see me put it out in a 2-minute video on Twitter, it's took ages to get that together. But it's important that we understand it, and it's important that we feel comfortable with our politics. Even if we don't like it, we need to be comfortable assessing it and knowing where they're going wrong. The world and his brother knows it's wrong to try and fuel and fund perpetuation of a war in Ukraine. There's 2 people know it has to stop. That's Putin and Trump. And it will. They'll come to a conclusion. And unfortunately, Zelensky, who came to office, bearing in mind, on a ticket of peace, that was his office. The Minsk Accord was due to be signed. He was going to see that to fruition. And then what happened? When he came to office, the neocons, they gained power. I don't know how they got to him. I'm not prepared to say. But they had him in the bag and he changed tack. And then Boris Johnson, when he was in office, he was deliberately sent by Joe Biden to scupper the Minsk Accord 2, which is basically peace talks. It's signing a ceasefire. That's what the Minsk Accord 2 was. And Boris Johnson went across. Funnily enough, he recently, as recently as weeks after doing that, he got paid an awful lot of money for speeches £5 million apparently for speeches, but I can't find any trace of the speeches. That's really strange, that. So when you see these other things from this pack showing this Unite the Right, I'll do a separate video on that, because I don't think that needs to be done. And to put all those faces, it's a mock-up photograph, obviously, of Nigel and Rupert, Nick Tenconi from UKIP, Ben Habib, and other people about the right wing uniting. That's I think that's out of order, personally, because nobody's got anyone's permission to do that. And Nigel Farage and one or two others wouldn't stand together with these other people. We don't need to unite the right. The right's already voted. They voted in the last election. That's why Reform got 4 million votes, 1 million more than the Lib Dums. Not a typo, that. I meant to say Dums. I mean, he wants war, doesn't he, in his Christmas jumper. So what you've got to look at, what is this pack exactly? I think they're trying to emulate CPAC in America, which is massive and extremely well funded. They've got the Rifle Association behind them. They've got several Japanese tech companies that do very well in a Trump administration right behind them. They've got other free speech lobbyists behind them, well funded again. This pack, I don't know where they're going to get the funding from, and I'm hoping it's not going to be asking the public, because I don't think the public should be paying for people to sit around talking politics. So, but that's just my view. You can do what you want, but I'm looking at people and I see comments on Thread where people can't afford to pay a particular bill and they're sending 20 quid off to something political. You're bonkers. Keep your money for yourself. Your household comes first. It's as simple as that. You and everything that you've built up, everything that's good in your life gets top priority over everything else. And then after that, you can decide what you spend your disposable income on. New eyebrows, tattoos, or political jargon, whatever floats your boat.